Okay, so hello, and welcome to the first in the Recover and Rebuild webinar series. This is a series of events that the School for Social Entrepreneurs have been planning across all of the 9 schools in the UK to try and bring together skill sets and learning to help entrepreneurs coming through the COVID crisis, to make sure that we're strong and stable and that we can build a really great economy moving forward. So today is the first, and we are going to be looking at cash flow in a crisis. Little bit of Zoom etiquette for you today, though, if you could. So if you could keep your microphones muted, that means that you'll be able to hear our speaker today without any interruptions. If you've got any questions, we would love to hear them. Please pop them in the chat window. There are 2 of us here. Helen Mincher, who you may or may not be able to see, she will wave, is watching, and I will be here watching. So any questions, just pop them in chat and we'll pull them up. But we will have a question and answer session at the end, about 15 minutes, for you to chat to our host about anything that's come up for you. Today, we're going to be hearing from Louise Treacher. Louise Treacher is a cash flow expert. She's fantastic. She's got 25 years of experience and is the former head of investment for Sport England. She's run her own business for 12 years and she now helps secure funding and ensure good governance for social purpose organisations across the UK, and has done a lot of work with SSE in the past. I'm just going to hand straight over, in fact, because we're going to crack on and we're going to do this. So we're going to have half an hour from Louise, and then we're going to open up for questions for 15 minutes. Great. Are you happy, Louise?
Yeah, fine. Okay. I've just actually been looking at the chat to see where you're all from, and it seems that we have people from all over the world, not just all over the UK. So that's not obviously at all scary for me. So we're going to be covering some financial information, financial bits and pieces around cash flow, and how we can utilise cash flow really at this time to help us to manage our organisation more effectively, and also to help us plan for the future. Because everyone at the moment obviously has lots of different things going on, and understanding where we are in terms of our financial management is critically important. So I'm going to run through some slides. I've got some information which I'm going to try to give to you via the chat function of Zoom, and hoping that that technology is going to work so that you've got some practical stuff to take away with you. I'm going to run through quite a lot of stuff. So if you've got questions, please add them to the chat and we'll pick them up. And I've also kind of had to assume that everybody's at the same level of knowledge, which you won't all be. You'll all have different levels of knowledge. So some of this you may know already, some of it you may not. Hopefully there'll be something that will be of help to you all. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to look at cash flow, what it is, why it's so important. I'm going to show you some examples of cash flow. We're going to look a bit at stock control and working capital as well, and the whole kind of financial management and how things fit together. And then we're just going to look at some tips for how you can manage cash flow more effectively if that's something that you need to do within your organisation. Okay, so I'm hoping that everybody understands what cash flow is, but basically it is exactly as we think it is. It is that flow of money in and out of an organisation. So money in versus money out, income versus expenditure, however you like to think about it. The great thing about cash flow is that it is constantly moving. So large organisations make cash flow on a daily basis. Smaller organisations may cash flow on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. It's really, really flexible, and you can utilise it to look at your organisation in whatever way suits you. Cash flow or lack of management of cash flow is the main reason that businesses fail, because they don't understand the need to understand money going in and money going out so that you've got enough money to pay for things at the point you need to pay for them. So that is why cash flow is king, if you've ever heard that statement, because it is so critical to maintain your sustainability. Now, you'll all be doing different levels of financial management in your organisation. There will be the information that you have to provide if you report to the Charity Commission or to Companies House or to whoever you report to in terms of financial management. And then there are other things that you can do within your organisation which benefit you as an organisation, but you don't officially need. So you're all probably aware of things like your balance sheet, which provides that instant snapshot at year beginning, year end. So that's a one-day position almost at that point in time. You've got your income statement, which is that very purist look of income versus expenditure. Gives you a slightly longer overview, and people use that to see the performance of your organisation over time. And then your cash flow, which, as we say, is a kind of organic creature that moves around day to day, month to month, and that can give you a very, very long-term view because it enables you to project into the future. You also may have a budget, work to a budget, or an operational plan, and that links together. You also may have an inventory or stock control, which again is very important in terms of cash flow. You also may know about your working capital and utilize that in terms of your financial performance as well. So loads of different things. Just for those of us who are much more visual, this is kind of how stuff fits together. So you've got your start and end of your financial year. So for the sake of arguments, this may be the 1st of April and your end of year may be the 31st of March. And between those two periods, you have all of your business activity taking place. So you've got your trading, other transactions which are happening, money in, money out. And those all go into creating your income statement and eventually your cash flow statement. And your balances, your opening balance sheets, as we said, those two snapshots fit around that at the beginning and the end of the year, talking about your assets and your liabilities. So basically the things that you own, whether they are equipment, building, cash, and the things that you owe, which are your liabilities. So that in terms of how cash flowing fits, it fits within that whole area of financial activity. But cash flow is that thing which happens on a day-to-day basis. Okay. So lots of people rely on profit and loss in terms of understanding whether they are doing well. So if I am in profit, I must be doing really, really well as an organisation. Actually, in terms of having a positive profit, you can still have a negative cash flow if you are in a positive profit situation. And you can also have a positive cash flow and not be making a profit. So as a standalone, income and expenditure or profit and loss is not a particularly great indicator of your overall financial health. However, they are both important for you to know. So just to enable you to see that practically, we've got a very, very simplistic view of how that actually happens. So we've got the Corona company in very bad taste at this point in time. But on a very simplistic level, if you work on an accrual basis, so you record your income and expenditure at the time that it occurred rather than when you receive it, you can have these different situations. So in our Corona company in January, they issued an invoice on January the 15th. So on a profit and loss basis, they made £100 in January. But on a cash flow basis, because that invoice wasn't paid, they didn't have any inflow of cash. However, on the end of January, they paid their payroll, which was £25. So on a cash flow basis, they had an outflow of £25. And on a profit and loss basis, they had a cost of £25. So if we just look at January, you can see that in terms of net cash flow, you've got a negative cash flow of minus 25. But in terms of profit and loss, you've got a positive profit of £75. So that just shows you on a very simplistic basis how you can have these two differing sides to the financial information. If you look at February, so as time carries on, the invoice that was issued in January has now been paid. So you've got the cash inflow in February of £100. And again, you're paying your payroll of £25. So for the month of February, your net cash flow has gone into positive situation of 75. And across those 2 months, a positive situation of 50. Over on your profit and loss basis, you didn't sell anything in February, so you had zero income at that level. You still paid your payroll of £25, so your net loss for February was £25, and your year-to-date profit now stands at £50. So it's, as I say, a very simplistic way of showing it, but it's just to show that actually profit and loss on its own isn't a great indicator, and cash flow on its own isn't necessarily a great indicator. It shows a different perspectives, but together they obviously give you a really good overview of where things are. Okay. So we know about cash flow. We understand that that's money in and money out of the organisation. The other thing which is really important to understand and have an idea of where you are is your something called working capital. Again, that's a snapshot situation of a moment in time, but that is basically the difference between your assets and your liabilities. So it shows your operational liquidity and the stability of your organisation. So quite often funders will look at working capital, and a lot of organisations are now looking at finance based on working capital. So such as big issues, especially for social enterprise, because working capital is critically important. So again, you can have a very positive cash flow, but have very little working capital. So if we just look at an example of how we work working capital out, it is purely assets and liabilities. So it's things like the amount of cash you've got in your bank account. It's about the amount that is outstanding and owed to you. And it's about your stock or inventory levels. And your liabilities are obviously things like if you've borrowed money, so short-term borrowings, you're paying back loans. Your accrued liabilities, so those are items that you may have purchased but you haven't yet been invoiced for. And your accounts payable, obviously money that you owe to people. So simple assets versus liability provides, in this case, a positive working capital of £40,000. So working capital is again a very good indicator of the sustainability of the organisation. So this is showing obviously that you are in a positive position, you have a level of working capital, which means that you are able to pay your debts for the foreseeable future. Okay, now I've got some working capital calculators which I can add to the chat, but I'll have to stop the screen share. So I'll just go through this one and then I'll try and add them in. So if you've got £40,000 worth of working capital, you're in a positive position. You've basically got more assets than liabilities. And as I said, you can cover your short-term liabilities. So it's seen as a great example, an identifier of financial strength. If you're in negative working capital, you obviously can't meet those obligations, but sometimes all organisations are in negative working capital because they're actually paying something back, or they've had a large cash transaction in order to put them into that position, but it's part of a managed process. Okay, right, I'm just going to see if I can dump you some working capital calculators. So that you've got those, otherwise I will get to the end and completely forget to do that for you. And then what we're going to look at after that. So could some of you just nod your head if this actually comes through to you? That would be really helpful so that I can see. Okay, so I'm going to put two things in. Okay, has that come through?
Yeah, we've got those, Louise.
Fab. Okay, so I'm just going to dump those two working capital calculators in there. If you want to use them at some later point, you can do. Okay, I'm just going to go back to the screen share. Okay, so moving on from working capital, the other bit obviously that you need in terms of putting that working capital together is some sort of stock control or inventory. So understanding how much stock you have is really, really important, because lots of organisations don't realise that they're actually sat on a lot of money in terms of their stock. And if things get tight in terms of cash flow, understanding when you need to purchase more stock is a really good way of managing your cash flow. So you're not thinking, oh, I've always bought these in January, I'll buy some more. Actually, you may have more than enough in your inventory that you don't need to purchase any more stock. So understanding that is really, really important. I'm just going to show you a really simple version of a stock sheet, which I use with a lot of organisations that I work with. All this does is help to monetize. I'm hoping that you can see a stock sheet now. This just helps to monetize stock. So it is a very simple stock sheet, which means a stock check is carried out every month. You've got the items here. You've got how much those cost. You can put VAT in, obviously, if that's essential. And then it creates a value of the amount of stock you're holding at any one time. So basically, you write in the amount of stock you're carrying in that month, and it just brings it into the summary and monetizes it for you. It's just very useful in terms of A, being able to then feed that information into financial calculations for the organisation, and B, in terms of maintaining an awareness of how much stock you've got, when you need to reorder, and also whether you need to liquidate any of that stock in order to bring some money back into the organisation. So that's a very simple little stock sheet, which again, I'm happy to share with you if that would be useful for anyone. Okay, I'm going to hopefully now dump that in there as well. If I don't do it as I go along, I'll forget, so okay.
For anyone who's worried, we'll send these out in a follow-up email afterwards. So if you can't see them because you're on your phone, that's okay.
Yeah, and I do apologise, we are having to whiz through stuff really, really fast. So lots of people will say, why do I need to do a cash flow forecast? You know, I know what my profit and loss is. I can see what's in my bank account. You know, I know that I'm okay. I know that I've got money to pay stuff. One of the reasons that you need to do a cash flow forecast is basically to do with your operating cycle. So again, a really simplistic view on what an operating cycle is, but all organisations should understand what that operating cycle is and what that cash flow gap looks like. So if you're a manufacturing organisation, it's obviously slightly different than if you're a service organisation, but obviously in this case you've got a manufacturing organisation. They receive goods in the warehouse. They then are taking the full 30 days to pay the supplier, but at that point the money for those goods leaves the organisation, and then they don't actually receive money back until the income comes back from their customer on day 75. So that point between 30 days and 75 days is what's known as their cash flow gap. So they have paid the money out, but they do not recompense themselves for that payment out until that period. And so what the cash flow forecast is about is ensuring that in between those, in that big gap there, you have got money in order to pay all your other bills. And so understanding what your cash flow gap is really important in order to know how to manage your finances effectively. So the operating period, as I say, is that point of time between basically money out, money in. It's worth taking 2 minutes just to look at that in terms of your own organisation. For some people, it's very, very short. I don't know where these lovely arrows have started appearing from, but they're very lovely. Okay, so why do I need to produce cash flow? As we've said, it's not just about knowing how much money you've got. It's about knowing how much money you've got at a point when you actually need that money. And that if you then want to make a large capital expenditure in the future, or if you want to take on another member of staff, you can actually project into the future and see when that's going to be a viable option for your organisation. It also enables you to look at how you can manage your expenditure more effectively. So in light of the times we're in at the moment, I've been working with lots of organisations to cash flow generally about 3 or 4 years into the future to see how the effect of COVID-19 is actually going to pan out for them. So organisations that have lost money in this financial year, for a lot of them, the actual full impact financially of that is not going to fall out for about 3 or 4 years. So that's why cash flow is fantastic, because you can project so far into the future. It also helps with your reconciliation. So it helps to ensure that overall your financial management is less prone to inaccuracies. So one of the things to think about with cash flowing is what sort of term you want to look at. So as I said, with lots of organisations at the moment, we've been looking very, very long term, because we're trying to see how we work out these massive loss of incomes for organisations. You know, what sort of changes to expenditure do they need to make in order to still be viable in 18 months' time, or what level of income do they need to bring in order to be viable in 18 months' time, so that they can start to look at their business planning, to look at their operational plans as to how they're going to fill those income gaps. Now, for some people, it's that short term, I just got to make the next 3 months before I can open my shop again, or I've just got to make the next 12 months before I can run my annual event, or before my season kicks back in again. And for others, it is those longer term things. So you can have cash flow which works on a monthly basis, daily basis, yearly basis, and the ones that I tend to use, as I say, are longer term, but actually work based on a monthly forecast. So they're very accurate to each month, but they are based over longer periods of time. So these are all the reasons that they help. They really help you to take into account the uniqueness of your organisation. So your cash flow is unique to you. It's no point looking at other people's cash flows to some extent, because all of the costings and all of the seasonality and the way that your business works in terms of operating cycle and staffing and all of those sorts of things in individuals. So it's really important that you create a cash flow that works for you. But it is fantastic if you have a cash flow which provides a budget and then a forecast in terms of scenario testing. So it will give you a document which you can actually say, oh, well, what would happen if I did lose a staff member and I dropped my staff cost down? How much longer does that give me positive cash flow? What happens if I want to take on a new member of staff, or I want to buy this £10,000 worth of equipment? How long is that going to take for me to go through that positively? So I use it most often with organisations in terms of that scenario testing. Let's look at what's going to happen in the future. Now, the things that you need in order to create a cash flow, I'm sure you already have. You need to know your income and expenditure. You need bank statements for reconciliation if that's not already being done, or you're not already doing that through something like Xero or QuickBooks. You need obviously to make sure that your bookkeeping's fairly up to date, and you need to make sure that your cash flow matches with your bank account in terms of reconciliation at the end of the month. And if you carry any sort of stock, it is really good to feed in that stock and inventory into cash flow as well. So what I'll do is I'll just show you an example of a cash flow. And this is one that I use all the time with organisations that I work with, just because it's fairly simple, but it actually is also very versatile in terms of what you want to do with it. What I will do is actually, I'm just going to, oh, no, I don't want that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dump this document into the side panel so that you can actually see that at the same time as well, because you probably are going to struggle to see it on my screen a little bit maybe. Okay, so we'll go back into the, so this is the cash flow document which I use. I just like it. It has 2 tabs on it. It has a budget sheet, which is fixed. So at the beginning of the cash flow exercise, I can fix all the costs in here based on the budget of the organisation. So this is one based for a charity. So we've got at the top all the income, donations, merchandise, events, trading company, corporates, gift aid, etc. Everything which is relevant. At the bottom we have all the expenditure. So we've tried to join these together. So we've got wages, premises, advertising, etc. All the normal sort of things you see in most organisations. Then for this particular organisation, we also have an event category at the bottom, just because we want to split those costs out a bit more. And also then we have cost of sales. So this is kind of the cost of the work of the organisation in this particular case. These will look different for every organisation, but will be under the same premise that income usually sits at the top and expenditure sits at the bottom. The way you manipulate those enables you to get different information out of it. And obviously at the top, you have your timeline. And as I said, we are forecasting in this particular situation right up to the end of 2022, just to see how things fall out. So what generally happens with this spreadsheet is you alter the numbers here in the budget. So these are, in theory, forecasted numbers. As they change and become reality during March, you update that and it updates your cash flow. So this is the cash flow sheet. The top, it has your bank accounts, and then this figure at the bottom is your cash flow. So that's indicating at each month what's happening to the cash flow position. And as you see, green is obviously good, and then it goes down, and as soon as we see anything with the brackets on, that's basically saying that you are in negative cash flow. You have run out of money. So if you do not increase your income or decrease your expenditure by this point, you will not be able to pay your bills in November. So the way that you can manipulate and utilize your cash flow is that, as I say, at the end of March, I would get the actual figures and they may be entirely different. So we may have had £500 here and £500 here and £5,000 here. And we may have only paid out £5,000 in salary, and we might have added in £1,000 in rent, etc. And what will happen as you alter the actual figures in your March column, your cash flow will be updated and it will alter, obviously, the figures as you move forward. So we can see now that because of those changes in March, we are no longer in negative cash flow in November. We turn into negative cash flow in December. So we bought ourselves a month by the amount of income that we brought in. So the way that you can use it for forecasting is, obviously, you can look at thinking, okay, we're going to aim for a big event in September, and we're going to add in £5,000. We're going to see what impact that has on our overall cash flow, or we're going to see about making people redundant in June, and thus we're going to see what dropping our wages bills for the foreseeable after June does in terms of our long-term cash flow. So it enables you, through that budget sheet, to, for want of a better phrase, mess around with all the figures to see how you can change the situation of your cash flow if you end up in this position of being in a projected negative situation. Because the only way to change the negative situation is either to increase the income or decrease the expenditure. So increase cash coming in and decrease cash going out. Okay? So we could obviously spend days talking about cash flow and cash flow diagrams, but we're just going to talk about, for the last few minutes, because I'm acutely aware of time, just going to talk about some tips and tricks as to how people do manage the cash flow in their organisation. So generally, the two ways that it's managed is you either want to speed up cash coming into your organisation, or increase cash, or speed up the way it comes in, and slow down cash going out. So the most effective ways of speeding cash up is being very efficient with your invoicing. As soon as invoices are required, you get them out, you get them to suppliers as quickly as possible, to purchase as quickly as possible. You look at your payment terms. So if your supplier has payment terms of 30 days and you have payment terms of 90 days, then obviously you've created a massive operating cycle gap there. So look at your payment terms, discuss with the people that you're invoicing whether they would actually be responsive to payment terms of 7 days, for example, if that's really going to help you. Proactively manage your invoicing. Lots of organisations are so lovely and they send out an invoice and then they just, let you take forever to pay it. And even if you go over 30 days, 30 years, they don't proactively manage that process. So make sure you're on top, you know who owes you money, you chase payments. One of the best things which social enterprise organisations can do is provide a really good range of ways that people can pay or donate or give you money. So look at all those options of EPOS systems, card machines, because particularly now in the post-cash COVID world, which we're going to enter, the ability for people to pay online, for people to pay via card, for people to pay via PayPal or Apple Pay, or any of those solutions is really, really critical. I've been working in my community shop this morning. We are in a village of predominantly 60 plus people, yet we have got all of them either setting up accounts, which they pay online, or they come in and use their contactless card. So actually and they've embraced it. They've been fantastic. Also look at the potential for deposits, upfront payments, and most critically, how you're pricing yourself, so that you're ensuring that you are actually covering all of your costs in your pricing. The extreme aspects of cash flow management is something called factoring as well. So if you are having a lot of bad debts, you can actually sell those to a third party and they'll give you a proportion of that money. It's not something that happens very often, but if it really is the difference between you surviving or not, then it's something to consider. Slowing cash outflow down. Think about when you're actually paying money out. So so for lots of organisations I work with, they pay, for example, their insurance in one block, or their business rates in one block, or and actually if they look at doing that as a direct debit, it makes all the difference in terms of their cash flow, because they are spreading out the impact of that payment over a larger time. As we talked about, managing that stock, being aware of costs. So each year or each quarter or each month, look at how much you're paying for stuff. Have you actually checked whether you can get it cheaper elsewhere? The other thing which a lot of organisations do now is that they batch all their payments. So they only make a payment once a week, once a month, once a quarter. That means that they make sure that in that point of payment, they've got cash flow to meet those all of those payments going out in one batch. It also means that you generally can batch payments in a different way and get your bank fees reduced. So it is worth looking at if you do a lot of payments out. Okay, so just to summarise, I'm really hoping that I'm on time. We talked about how important cash flow is, and how useful it is in manipulating and testing different scenarios, which I think from the feedback I'm getting from organisations I work with is what people are trying to do most of at the moment. It's really difficult to look into the future and it's not precise, but if you know your business as well, you will be able to kind of put together a fairly robust forward projection, which you can then manipulate. It also, if you know your cash flow, it puts you in a very able position to proactively manage it and be positive about managing it as well. And whilst cash flow is brilliant, it also is part of that bigger financial package. So all those elements are important, but for me, I think cash flow is one of the most important out of everything. Okay, I think that's the end. It is. So I'm going to stop my screen share. Or shall I keep my screen share open for a moment, just in case anyone wants to go back?
In case anyone wants the information. Okay. That is absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, Louise. So just for the people that are a bit worried, everything that Louise has shared, we've downloaded and we will be emailing everybody out after this, just to thank you for coming. Here are the resources, and to let you know about which other seminars are coming up as part of the Recover and Rebuild series. So don't worry, we will get them out to you, and we'll put Louise's contact details in there as well, in case you want to reach out and make use of her expertise again. So questions, who's got questions? We've got a question here from Aziz. What recommended courses could be taken by a solo founder to acquire the cash flow and be ready when getting bigger with a team? Anybody know?
So courses in terms of training courses?
Yeah, do you have any advice on what people can do to upskill themselves, really?
Gosh, I think, in terms of courses, I mean, there are a million different things on YouTube, obviously, which talk to you about how to do cash flow. I don't know any that would specifically help you with cash flow off the top of my head. Okay. I mean, I think It depends. I mean, if you're using something like Xero or QuickBooks, I definitely have a look at the training courses around that, because they help you in terms of understanding cash flow and how it fits with those sorts of your whole accounting package system, if that makes sense. But I don't know any specific courses alone which will help you around cash flow. There are some kind of basic business financial management courses that are run by lots of organisations, but in terms of quality, I don't know, and I would be very hesitant to recommend one not really knowing whether it was any good or not.
Okay, Louise, do you want to take the screen share off for us, and then we'll be able to see everybody again? Put you up on gallery mode so we can see everybody in case we've got questions with hands. Sophie was asking earlier, you referenced Xero a minute ago, if anybody had any recommendations for cheap or quick tools to help with invoices and invoice payment. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so lots of people use Xero. Xero offer a reduction package to charities, which QuickBooks don't, but QuickBooks is another one, but those are both paid for. Off the top of my head, I know lots of people use Wave, which I believe is free. And there are some other really, really good free accounting packages, particularly if you're not invoicing huge amounts, or taking large amounts of payments. Lots of banks, I think Helen's just put up that Free Agent is free to NatWest bankers. Yeah, lots of banks actually provide free accounting software as well as part of their business banking, so that's worth looking at as well. If you're a larger organisation, I would 100% recommend getting something like Xero or QuickBooks or similar, just because they are fantastic tools. It will make your life incredibly much easier, even though it takes a little bit of outlay of time and effort in the beginning. But there are some other great free packages around if you're not turning over vast amounts.
Great.
Yeah, that Federation of Small Businesses. Yeah, yes.
So some resources popping up in the chat. If people aren't watching it, there are some resources.
Yeah, Helen's also put Sage in there. They do support social enterprises. Feedback I've had on Sage is that it's very complex and very much more, lots of accountants love Sage. In terms of individuals with not a huge amount of financial experience, tends to be, the others are a little bit more user-friendly, have nice diagrams and stuff, and charts and things and pretty pictures, which in my word makes it all much nicer.
There's a question from Tamsin. Is there a risk of confusion between the predicted cash flow and the actual on the spreadsheet as you update it with actual figures? How do you avoid that?
Hang on, is there a risk of confusion between the predicted cash flow and the actual on the spreadsheet as you update it with actual figures? When you shared any example? Okay, so Tamsin, what happens is that the predicted cash flow is updated based on the actual figures. So that cash flow will change instantly as you update the figures. So even if you keep all the other figures constant in your budgeting, it will update itself based on the real scenario. So in theory, that's better for you because it becomes slightly more accurate than your projections. What you then may need to do is relook at the budget figures in order to change them based on how your actuals are panning out. So if, for example, you thought you were going to spend £400 a month on rent, but actually your landlord came back and say it's going to be 300, then you would update your actual, but then also update your budget moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yes, probably. I'm not very mathematically minded. Tamsin says, okay, thank you then. I've got just a request here from Shweta, apologies if I've said your name wrong, that some of that was quite quick and quite hard to follow.
Yeah.
We are recording this session and we will be getting it online for people, so that won't be immediately, but we keep an eye on the hub page, which we'll link to in the follow-up email, and you can check in and you can come back and watch it all over again if that helps. Okay, so sounds like you're doing well on speeding up cash inflow, which is great. So slowing down cash outflow, and I'm going to pick up my piece of paper so I make sure I get the right ones and I don't get them mixed up. Slowing down. Okay, so timing your payments. So if you have a cash flow forecast, you can see where your cash flow is slightly more positive, and so you time your payment to go out when you can afford it.
or you delay a payment so that you can ensure positive cash flow. That is really common, that actually one payment can make a massive difference. And that sometimes is business rates, which organisations are forced to pay in one point, and that can put you under for a month. So think about that payment timing. Look at direct debits. So if you can chunk a larger payment down into payments either each quarter or each month, that will help with your cash flow because you're not seeing that big peak and trough. Maximize the terms of payment. So if you are being lovely and people are sending you invoices and you are paying them the next day when actually they've got 30-day term on them, it might be worth you just, you know, thinking, actually I'll wait a little bit longer, because that will help with your cash flow. That's that kind of the circle stuff. Looking at your stock, so whether you're sat on lots and lots of stock and that's got a cash value, and whether you can liquidate that, or whether you can actually stop purchasing, so minimize your expenditure because you're sat on a lot of stock. Check and challenge. So if you are buying lots of items, have you actually carried out a recent check on pricing so that you're getting the best deal? Have you kind of challenged volume pricing? So could you cash flow to buy 1,000 of something rather than 100 of something to get you better value for money? And batching payments in terms of just having one payment run a month or a week or a year, whatever you happen to be in your organization. It helps to manage your cash flow, and it helps to, if you do it well, to minimize your bank payments, because lots of people, we're all getting crucified by bank charges at the moment. I think I also put on there consolidating your bank accounts. Some organizations have lots of bank accounts, and sometimes consolidating them together gives you a much better cash flow, rather than trying to work across different bank accounts.
Great. There's a lot of praise in the chat right now for Xero. If people are considering what kind of package they want, there are an awful lot of actual people saying, we use Xero, it's great. There's apparently it has a developer community, and accountants prefer it. So if any of you are trying to figure out what to use, Xero is coming up winning. Did we have any more questions? Any more? No? We're all happy. Okay, so we will be sending out a follow-up email. We will be linking you into the hub page for these recover and rebuild sessions, so you'll be able to follow the ones that are coming up, because we've got a few over the next month or so. Also, we'll put a link into any of the short online workshops that SSE run in case they're of use to you, and all of the links from Louise's today. So we'd just like to say a huge thank you to Louise. And if you've got any other concerns or things that you want help on, just do drop us an email. We're here to help you. It's what we want to do, and we want to be guided by what you need in terms of what we put in this series. So thank you for coming, and have a great rest of your afternoon. Okay, thank you everyone. Bye.
Thanks a lot.